It's like a homecoming around here at KCAL9 and CBS2 today. We got somebody everybody knows, reporter Dave Lopez, legendary reporter Dave Lopez. And he's got his new book. It's called It's a Great Life If You Don't Weaken, Family, Faith, and 48 Years on Television. Welcome back, and there's the book.
Thank you.
So incredible.
Thank you.
What we just talked about, why you started to write the book. And you actually had it going before the pandemic that kind of started to...
Well, I always wanted to write a book. I mean, and the book is not just about stories I covered. You know, I heard you mention that you just turned 45, so happy birthday to you.
Almost 45.
Okay. Right.
You
almost 40. Almost 45. Okay. I have stories in this book that are older than you.
Well, yeah, there's one from 1977. When you started, I read the description. It was the fire.
Right. When none of the firefighters could speak very good Spanish, and there was a little delay. I mean, it wasn't a major big story, but what happened, it brought out the idea that there are firefighters who just couldn't speak the language. At the time, I think there were only 5% of the Hispanics population on the fire department, very low, and what have you. But I started writing the book. I retired in June of 2020. And I always had a goal to write a book. I thought I had some good stories. And it came out. I had a wonderful, wonderful woman who helped me along the way. Without her, Julie McCarran, this does not exist. Terrific support from my darling wife, Deandra. And it's done. I picked today, the reason we rolled it out today, April 19th, this would have been my mom and dad's 75th wedding anniversary. Wow. And the book talks a lot about my mom and dad, my upbringing. It was unusual at the time that my father was a very prosperous businessman, and that just didn't happen back then. I wasn't the first Hispanic reporter on air in LA, but I was one of the first. There weren't that many of us. And I just take you through the journey. It was a wonderful experience. And I also talk about the highs and the lows of my life. I had a bout with cancer. I lost my first wife because of a very rare disease. I lost my mother because of Alzheimer's. My father couldn't cope with it, and it was very difficult. So all of this, I interwove it, and hopefully it makes a good read for people.
When you say it's a great life if you don't weaken, what does that mean?
My father used to always say that, and I thought it was his original phrase. There's other books that have that title. That's why I'm going to put in the family, faith, and 48 years on television. So here I thought my father, my dad made up this great phrase. He always used to say to us, it's a great life if you don't weaken. He always used to say the only thing that money can't buy is good health. And I used to say to myself, what the hell does that mean? I don't know what he's talking about. It is a great life if you don't let the things that are going to happen to you, and bad things are going to happen to you. That's just the way life is. And I think I wanted to point out in this book that even though things sometimes can look really bleak and really bad, if you just keep your nose to the grindstone, you still have faith in yourself and faith in whatever God you want to believe in, things will work out. And a lot of this comes from my mom and dad. Everything that I have done to be a success in this life started with the way my mom and dad raised us. I'm the oldest of 8. My mother was a saint, is a saint. I call her Saint Matilda. And I didn't know that there actually is a Saint Matilda. Raised 8 children, did everything that you possibly could do as a mom. And I've had a marvelous, wonderful life, and I hope I capture this in these pages.
Do you talk about some of the most memorable favorite stories that you covered?
Well, I certainly talk a lot about what happened with the Bonin case. Bonin was a serial killer who wound up confessing to me. It was a great crisis at the time because I didn't want to give up what they call the shield law. I don't want to bore people too much with that. It's all explained in the book. And I wound up testifying. The Heidel case certainly was a big one in Orange County. The Corona case, which led to his losing his job. There's all kinds of things. I talk about different stories that I covered through years. I mean, I couldn't possibly have put every single one of them in here.
Of course not.
I mean, there were days when I would do 2 or 3 stories a day here. And it got to the point where I was running around so much that rather than write everything down, I said, you know what, let's wing it. And I started that pretty about 25, 26 years ago.
I was going to say, well, one of the things you're known for is that you can just write a script right from your tip of your tongue.
Well, I mean, that was almost like out of necessity because at the time we had a news director who really didn't give you a lot of time to do things. And so one day I said, let's just try this, see if this will work. And it worked, and I was able to, I always remember we had a wonderful managing editor here one time, years and years ago. It goes way back.
Before Paul Button?
Yeah, before Paul. Paul is terrific. But Carl Fleming was one of a kind, and he used to have he had that North Carolina accent. He used to call me Davy. He goes, Davy, you got to write like you talk. And I always thought of that when off the top of my head, I said, hey, I'm writing like I talk. And so, I mean, it's all in here, little anecdotes and what have you. I mean, I've seen it all. When my daughter was born, across, I was working at Channel 9 at the time. Across the street was a very famous restaurant, El Adobe, Lucy's El Adobe. The owner, Frank Casada, called me in, said, "Hey, I want you to meet some people." I said, "I gotta go. He says, no, come in. So I go into the back room, and sitting there waiting for me, not for me, but sitting there waiting as I walk in, was Jerry Brown at his first go-round as governor, okay? This is 1975. Then Hubert Humphrey, who was senator of Minnesota, he was in town for a function, and Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
Yeah, so we sat there, and Ali didn't drink, but we're sitting there, we're having food, and we're having a great old time, and I mentioned, I got to get out of here. I got a brand new daughter at home. I got to get going. And Ali goes, "What's her name?" And I told him, and he wrote a poem to her, and it's in the book.
That's an incredible encounter.
Something about fish and the net and, whatever. I mean, maybe it'd be worth some money someday. Who knows?
All right, before we let you go, how is retirement treating you? I mean, you retired in the middle of covering some of the biggest stories. You were helping us at that time, leading our coverage of the pandemic, and left us in June 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking maybe it might be, maybe I should stay and wait till this pandemic is over. If I had done that, I'd still be working.
Well,
but
you're very much missed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, the time was right. I always had the philosophy that I will know when it's time. And it hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I explain all this in the book. Yeah. I miss the people like you and all these. It was nice to see so many people here today. But it was time, and I always had the philosophy: get out 1 year too early, then 1 year too late.
Yeah. Well, the book is called It's a Great Life. If you don't weaken family faith in 48 years on television, a little older than me.
Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine that? 48 years. I mean, where did the time go?
But you look the same as when you did when I started here 9 years ago. So,
well,
anyway, Dave Lopez, the legendary Dave Lopez. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Tom. One quick thing. I'm going to be at Barnes and Noble.
I know. I was just about to tell the people. See,
Barnes and Noble at the Grove at 4:30, and there's a great guy on the radio. His name is Tim Conway. He does a show on KBC, and I'm going to be on his show a little after 7 o'clock tonight. So
perfect.
And tomorrow on KNX.
And people can meet you. You'll sign their books, right?
I hope so.
There you go. There's the information just on our screen.
Okay, good. Well,
all righty. Up next, our buddy Evelyn Taft will be back with the forecast and some maybe rain on the way.